Guys, welcome back to Four Towers Films and another edition of A Writer's Life. This week, I'm going to talk about how to write a book. It could be fiction, it could be nonfiction, whatever you're wanting to do. I know it's daunting when you first start out, and believe me, it is a lot of work to write a novel, but it can be done if you follow a few steps. Of course, you can take it and just run with it and, write willy-nilly and just go with the flow kind of thing. Or you can have set steps that you follow that might make it a little easier to get to that 50,000 words. If you've ever done NaNoWriMo, you know what I'm talking about. So let's start with the first step that you can take. The first step that you can take is establish where you want to write your book. That could be a quiet place in your bedroom. It could be an office in your home. It could be on the kitchen table or dining room table, on a chair in your living room, wherever it is. It could be even be at the library. Our library has private places that you can rent, or, well, not rent, but borrow for an hour or two. You have research materials there. It's quiet, and nobody will bother you. Just make sure that when you sit down to write, that you have enough time or enough privacy. I mean, if you like chaos, then even a coffee shop is great. If you like to thrive on sounds and people around you and get inspiration from that, then even a coffee shop or restaurant, even a McDonald's, it could be the place that you might want to write at. But the point is to establish a place where you get inspiration, that you can really sit down to work, and for that block of time that you set out each day, each week, even each month at first, because if you're busy and you have kids or whatever else, you might not have every day that you can set at first to write in. But make sure you take that time and go to that special spot that you've decided is going to be your writing spot. When you finally have all your tools and things in place, you're going to start sitting down to write. Once you have an idea, first of all, of what you want to write, either fiction or nonfiction, if you're doing nonfiction, now will be the time you're going to research what you're writing about. Fiction writers can also do research depending on what it is they're writing about. Say it's a crime novel, you might want to learn about police procedurals, or thrillers to how would somebody break into a house, or, whatever it might be. It's good, if you want to be realistic, to research plot points that you're going to come up with ahead of time. We can get into that in another video, but for now, we're just going over the basics. So the first thing you're going to do is break up your book. A minimum book is 50,000 words. That's a lot. I mean, if you've done NaNoWriMo, novel writing in a month, for those who might not have heard of it, that's about 1,600 words a day. Now, that's a lot of words for people who haven't done that before, and may not be used to that kind of writing, and it could take a while to do. Because I do writing for a living, I can do about that much within an hour or less, just because if you're freelance writing, you eventually will get faster at writing and coming up with ideas and crafting it, which is another video that we can talk about later. But when you're first starting out writing a novel, you have to break it down into pieces. So instead of thinking of it as this giant 200, 300 page book, and actually, when you're publishing, it's in a print form or ebook form, it might end up being more pages or less pages than will be in your word processing program. So don't necessarily go by page. Go by, if you want a novel length that's 50,000 words minimum, novelette is less than that. So, or novella is less than that. And of course, short story could be even up to 1,000 words. So, but that's book writing, although that's a great way to start if you're just starting out writing in fiction or even nonfiction, is to start out in shorter bursts, and then you can gradually write up to a novel length. But break it down into pieces. You don't always have to start with the beginning. And actually, sometimes a lot of novelists do not start at the beginning, they'll start at the end, because sometimes the end of a book is a lot harder to write. You know how you want to get there. You know how you might want the ending to be, but if you're writing all the way through it, and it could change because your plot will change. Even if you've set out on a specific way you want your story to go, your plot can actually change during it. Your ending completely ends up being something different. So if you want your ending to be a specific way, a surprise ending, a twist, whatnot, write it first. And then you can write backwards. You can jump between the middle to the beginning, to conversations, to whatever comes to your mind first, write that instead of trying to go in order. It's actually quite difficult to write a novel in order from beginning all the way to the end. Some authors prefer to do it that way, just because that's just their style, but it's not necessary, and a lot of writers don't do that because something like the main action might come up to them first. So that's why they decide to do maybe the middle, or an action scene, or a romance scene, or love scene, that sort of thing. So write what comes to mind first, and then that's what editing's for. You piece it all together at a later date. One great tip I can give you when you're starting to write something big like a novel is write about something you're really passionate about, or something that you really like, because when you're writing a large project like this, it can get to the point where, if you're not that interested in it or excited about it, it can get boring after a while, or it gets tedious and you can lose interest. You may not finish it. And a book can take months to write. Now, granted, there are authors who can write it in a very short period of time, but they probably have a lot more experience or have been doing it a long time and have already maybe even had an outline, which is something else that you can think about if you don't want to freeform it, is create an outline of your book. But have your idea first. So say it's sci-fi or fantasy. Focus on what your idea is. Is it don't necessarily do it around one particular character, because your characters might change, or you might add characters in where the plot tends to follow them instead of the character you initially wanted to follow. So think of what your main idea is first. So is it an action novel, is it dystopian, romance, and what your main driving plot is, and make sure it's something that you really love to do and are really interested in, one that you would want to read yourself. Once you know what you want to do, what your plot line is going to be, your idea, you create your outline. Now, if you're writing a nonfiction book, it's pretty much a must, because things with nonfiction have to have a pretty linear progression of what you're talking about. So it could be anything with landscaping or HVAC, it doesn't matter. But pretty much it doesn't necessarily read like a manual, but it should have a logical progression through the book, what you're talking about. So it could be a whole section on trees, or and then like maybe grass, or how to weed, or how to set up a landscape, or water features, or things like that sort of idea. And so if you have an outline, and this does work for fiction as well, it helps you when you're researching how to focus on each individual area that you want to focus on and how to write it. And actually, if you are planning to publish this later on, especially with a nonfiction book, publishers want to see an outline. They will with a fiction book too, but a lot of the times with fiction book, and we'll get into publishing it in another video, but they want to see the first, sometimes 2 to 3 chapters of a book. And for fiction, that can be kind of like your outline, but you will have to give them a synopsis of the book. So an outline will help with that anyway, to start with. So, and it'll help you in the long run, especially if you don't want to write off on a big tangent, to keep on track and on your plot, either for fiction or nonfiction. A great tip is find a mentor. This could be somebody who's been published, who's maybe a little further down the road than you are, and maybe they are where you want to be. They can give you tips and tricks on how to write a book, get polish it for publishing, how they did their outlines, all that sort of thing. You can also join a writing group or take writing courses. A lot of writing courses are actually taught by published authors, possibly in the field you're interested in. So it's a good idea because it gives you a little bit of an idea from a professional standpoint of somebody who's been there. You can learn things online as well. There's plenty of groups on there that you can talk with, connect with writers online. Even well-known writers, a lot of them have Facebook or Twitter, and they're very interactive with their readers, and a lot of them are more than willing to answer questions for you. One of the hardest things you're going to do when you're writing a book especially is to set a deadline of when you want it finished totally. Now, if you're new at it, it could take a while. It could be a year. It could be longer. Some writers never finish the books, or it can take them 10 years to write it. So if you don't want it to take 10 years, well, then set a specific deadline of when you want to finish it by. But taking into consideration, you want to break it down. So say you want to do the first 5 chapters. Set a deadline for when you want those first 5 chapters to be finished by. Do you think it'll take you a couple weeks? Do you think it'll take you a couple months? Do you want to finish it within the first 6 months? Set that deadline to what you picked for your writing schedule, for how writing speed that you're able to do. Because not everybody is a really fast writer, especially when they're first starting out. Believe me, typing is not the same as writing. And we could talk about that as well. You could be a really fast typer, but writing is different because you may not be as fast of writers who are a typer. Typing is you're talking and you're texting or emailing or searching for something, and you can be really quick. I'm a pretty fast typer just because I kind of have to be with but I've always been, because, social media and chat rooms and all that sort of stuff. But when you're writing, you'll have to do research, break it down, and edit, proofread, and all that sort of stuff. And we can get into that too even with freelance writing in another video of speed and how much you can make depending on how fast you can write, not just type. So same thing goes with novel writing. So if you are a fast typist, don't necessarily think that's how fast you're actually going to be able to write your novel. So, because you want to be able to think of what your next scene is going to be, how you're going to break it down, especially for nonfiction. You need to factor in research. You need to factor in taking the best points of multiple sources when you're writing and extrapolating from that. So you're not copying what they've already done, but you're putting it into your own words and what you yourself know about whatever the topic is. And that's why, especially with nonfiction writing, it's actually better to write about something you have expert knowledge in or you have done for a living. One thing you could definitely count on when you're writing, doesn't matter if it's book writing or not, you're going to want to procrastinate. You're going to want to take time off, take a break. Your mind wanders. Check out Facebook. All writers do it, professional and otherwise. So don't feel bad about yourself if you find yourself daydreaming or procrastinating, or I think I'll do the dishes instead of writing right now, because it's pretty typical of all writers. We all do that, and that's okay. Let yourself do that, because writing is very much a mental type job. If you were out doing construction, you would take time off, you would have a break, like you'd have lunch, you'd have a break, all that sort of thing. You also, talk about with your, site managers or whatever to figure out what you're going to do next, kind of thing with the job. It's the same thing with writing. The thing is, because it's a solitary job, it is a profession, you're gonna go more to say like social media, or if you're at a coffee shop, excuse me, like you'll start talking maybe to the people there, especially if you go there a lot. Let yourself do that, because actually I'll tell you something else. It can give you inspiration for possible scenes in your book. Not all scenes in your book, especially if it's fiction, are going to be action-packed or full of drama or whatnot. So if you have these type filler and they're connector pieces, it makes your characters more three-dimensional, makes it more realistic. Even if it's just a fantasy book, you can make it seem more relatable and realistic by maybe having your characters talk to the baristas at a coffee shop, or they're going to get their car fixed, or they're checking out social media. Give your characters jobs, that sort of thing. So you're procrastinating and checking out social media. Maybe there's a post on social media that catches your attention. You can write that in for what your character does. You get inspiration from everywhere, even procrastinating. And plus it gives you a break and lets you refresh, and you'll come back to it later, ready to jump into it again. One thing you're going to hear a lot, potentially, is turn off your inner editor while you are writing. Believe me, when you're writing, you might hate something that you've written, and you're going to want to erase it all and start over, or edit it, or change something. What I try to do is not read back what I've written already, unless I have to, because say I've left that part and then I have to come back in and I'm writing the scene right after it. Because I know I'm going to want to rewrite that whole thing. And yes, revisions and rewriting are part of the writing process, but they shouldn't be for first draft, because you'll never finish writing the first draft if you do that otherwise. So if you can, don't read back unless you have to, because you're coming back and writing the next scene after what you've written. And then just write like that, the next scene, because a lot of times if you're writing it out of order anyway, you're not necessarily going to have to read back what you've just written, unless it's the next scene, of course. So turn off your inner editor, and editing, and that is for the revision, second drafts, third drafts. That's when you get into editing and rewriting and all that sort of thing. So the first draft, just turn off your inner editor and write. Once you get to the point where you are finished your first draft, then it's time to do your second and third drafts, which is editing or rewriting. So when you're doing that, you're reading through very carefully your manuscript or your book for things that don't quite fit, redundancies, wordy sentences, adjectives that you don't really need, or explanations that you don't really need, that sort of thing. Plus proofreading. So we all make spelling mistakes. For proofreading, grammar, punctuation, all that sort of thing. But usually you're going to do more than one read through. So the first read through is really just to kind of tighten it up a little bit. Take out what you don't need. You can even take out whole scenes that you don't need. That's what the whole first draft is for. Second and third readings or writings, you tighten it up even more, and that's when you start doing your proofreading and punctuation, grammar, that sort of thing. It's actually a good idea, if you can, is to hire a proofreader and an editor. Two different things. If you can only afford one, then, go with an editor. And then, because they'll catch things that you don't, because the more that you read your own manuscript or your own book, the less you're going to pick out errors in your book. Because you get so familiar with your own writing over time, you do miss things. That's why we have editors, so they catch things that we miss. And there's actually different kinds of editors out there, which we could talk about later once we get to the publishing stage. So that's just the start of what it's like to become a book writer. We can further break down different steps that are a little bit more complicated, like writing, rewriting, editing, finding a topic, how to really love your topic, and character development. And we'll do that in later videos coming up. And we'll also talk about nonfiction. I hope you enjoyed my video, and please give it a thumbs up and subscribe. If there's anything you'd like me to cover in the series, leave it in the description box. And don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification to let you know the next time I upload a video. I upload 3 times a week. Mondays is A Writer's Life. Wednesday is A Matter of Opinion, where I give my opinion on products or just what's going on in the world. And then Friday is Live Stream Friday, usually with Doug 218, where it's pretty much free for all. So hope you will join me the next time, and we'll see you soon. Take care and have a great week.